Hey, good morning. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Got my cup of coffee. I'm going to say much needed cup of coffee. Did not sleep well. Feeling a little sluggish today, so got my cup here. Got my special cup that goes on the warmer, keeps it nice and hot because I'm probably going to need this today to keep me going. I hope you probably had a better night's sleep than I did and you're having a good Wednesday, but always appreciate the few minutes you take out of your day to spend these times together as we learn more about the life and ministry of Jesus. And we're kind of at the most important time. We're at that last week of Jesus's life, leading up to the crucifixion. Vitally important. We call it Holy Week. And it's around the corner here. It's in April, just a few weeks away. We'll be celebrating that. Palm Sunday into Good Friday into Easter Sunday. We'll be celebrating that. The whole world church will be doing that. Christian church will be doing that period of time. But we're kind of getting a preview here a few weeks before. And today we have a really unusual story. In many ways, it sort of sticks out in this account of the last week of Jesus. And a couple of the other gospel writers mention it, so it was pretty significant. It's often called the cursing of the fig tree. So real quick telling is Jesus is in Jerusalem. He goes by a fig tree. Actually, let me just read a couple verses from Matthew 21. That's where we've been. It says, early in the morning, he, meaning Jesus, as he was on his way back to the city of Jerusalem, he was hungry. And he saw a fig tree by the road, and he went to it, but found nothing on it except leaves. Then he said to it, "May you never bear fruit again." And immediately the tree withered. And the disciples are amazed. They saw this. They said, "How did the fig tree wither so quickly?" It's an unusual story, right? It's a little bit out of character, we might think, for Jesus. It's almost like he was hangry. That expression that some people are like that when they get hungry, they're just kind of a little tense, a little angry. And it's almost like Jesus is there. I'm hungry. I want something to eat. I don't see any figs. Curse you, fig tree! Like this angry Jesus. And a lot of people on the heels of the cleansing of the temple might embrace that wrongly, I would say, because I find in Jesus, as I study and I learn about him, he was, I'll use this word, the most intentional person ever. Not a word or an action of Jesus was wasted. If he said it or if he did it, it was full of meaning. It was significant. His life was not wasted, not a moment of it. And so when we come across this, particularly something that kind of stands out, much like we looked at last time with the cleansing of the temple, some people think, it's just a story that shows Jesus got angry and it gives me the right to get angry. So you might look at this and think the same way. Like, here's Jesus. He's just kind of angry Jesus in this time. Maybe, almost like he knows what's coming, because he does. And he's a little stressed about it. That is the wrong read. I hope last week when we talked about the cleansing of the temple, you understood that was the wrong read. And I want to say here, it's also the wrong read. This isn't just a fickle, short-tempered Jesus seeing a tree and being hungry and cursing it. There is intention behind it. I want to point out one little detail that Matthew gives, and the other gospel writers make a point to. It says that in verse 19 of Matthew 21, he went up to it but found nothing on it, and then this phrase, except leaves. Now, for us, what does that mean? Maybe not a lot, but for those who know, many fig trees have fruit before they have leaves. In fact, there's sometimes on fig trees two crops of fruit. One that comes in the early spring season that precedes the leaves, and then the later summer into fall crop that comes after the leaves. So a fig tree with leaves, we would think the opposite. Most trees, when they begin to grow in the spring, put on leaves, and if they have fruit, that comes much later. For a fig, it can be the opposite. And so for Jesus to see a tree with leaves, the assumption would be there's fruit on there because there's leaves on there. And when he gets to it, he finds that there is no fruit, there's nothing on it except leaves. And so he says, "May you never bear fruit again." So I think that's the little clue here, that the tree had the appearance that it should have fruit, but in actuality, it didn't. And this is where the flow of this particular time in Jesus' life matters. The story arc, the plot that's developing and unfolding. Because I think what we see here with the cursing of the fig tree mirrors a little bit of what we saw last time. Jesus went to the temple as he came into Jerusalem. Now, the temple is the symbol of God's presence, God's blessing for the people of Israel. The temple is the center of their religious life. And it was a thriving place, particularly around a Passover holiday, which was the case when Jesus was coming into town with all these other pilgrims to one of the big pilgrimage feasts of Israel. So many people coming in town. The temple was the centerpiece, was the hub of activity around that, and it symbolized for Israel God's presence and blessing. Okay, we kind of know that. We've talked about that before. But what Jesus finds when he goes into the temple is what? In all of this activity, what it was really supposed to be for, it wasn't doing. What it was really supposed to be about, it was actually hindering. Instead of allowing people, becoming a house of prayer for all nations, so that people from all over would come to worship the one true God who had revealed himself to Israel. Don't want to knock that over. The one true God that had revealed himself to Israel, it had become a marketplace where people couldn't worship, couldn't pray. It looked like, hey, look at this beautiful religious center with all of the finery that you would expect around the holiday of Passover. And yet, when you get there, the fruit, I'll use that word purposely, the fruit of what should happen, of worship of God, wasn't happening, something else. So the appearance didn't match up to the reality. Just like this fig tree. The appearance didn't match up to the reality. The appearance, hey, this should be fruitful. There was no fruit. The appearance of the temple was this should be fruitful for God. There was no fruit. It was something else. And in fact, when we look at the next passage, and maybe I'm getting ahead. I don't know if I'll do this next week, but the next passage, Jesus goes back into the temple. So he goes into the temple, he cleanses it, he curses the fig tree, he goes back to the temple. So you see how the fig tree is in the middle of these two temple episodes. And the chief priest and the elders of the people, the religious leaders, come to him and say, by what authority are you doing these things? And who gave you this authority? Jesus had been doing something. And what are the two things that we've seen immediately before this? Cleansing the temple. Actually, he healed some folks, and they didn't like that either. They questioned him before the cursing of the fig tree about, telling these children to kind of hush up because they were excited to see Jesus. That's a thing that's happened before. And then afterwards, they question him, who do you think you are? That's not the way we would say, who do you think you are that you're doing all this? And who are the people asking that question? The religious leaders. And at the Passover in the temple, you would know who the religious leaders were because they had the appearance. They had all the right garb. They had all the right garments. They dressed the part of being the religious leaders of Israel. And what we find is that they had the appearance, but there was something missing. They didn't have the fruit. They didn't have the reality. And we see this elsewhere. In fact, Jesus, not too long after that, calls some of these religious leaders, he calls them whitewashed tombs. They're all dressed up and look pretty on the outside, but on the inside, they're full of dead men's bones. They look pretty on the outside, but there's no fruit. They have the appearance, but no fruit. The fig tree cursing isn't Jesus haphazardly having a moment of impatience and hunger. It's Jesus making a point to his disciples. It's Jesus making a point to the whole nation of Israel who will pay attention. And this record would be circulated by not just Matthew, but other gospel writers of this act to say, look, this edifice, this structure that is the temple, that has the appearance of standing for God, of standing for faith, of drawing the nations to it, is actually fruitless. And it's going to be cursed. And as we said last week, it's not too long after this moment where Jesus curses the fig tree and has cleansed the temple that the temple is actually destroyed by Rome in 70 AD. And even you go there today, it has not been rebuilt. There's still some remnants of it. You can go to the Western Wall and all, but it's not been rebuilt. A part of this is tied to what Jesus is saying here. The appearance, the outside, it can look real pretty, but on the inside, if there's no fruit, if there's nothing to follow it up, it's meaningless. And so this this episode really is part of the story. Again, if you hear nothing else I say today, hear this. Jesus never acts unintentionally. Jesus is very purposeful in all that he says and does, including this. So we've got to, when we come across something, particularly like this, that kind of goes, wait, that seems out of character for Jesus, we need to really look and dig and find out, no, he's the Savior. This isn't he had a bad moment, because that would be sinful, and we know that would be a problem for the Savior to have. No, this is intentional. This is purposeful. This is to give a message, certainly to Israel, but also to us. You know, one of the things that we've even been talking about on Sunday morning in the Sermon on the Mount, one of the themes that Jesus hits over and over again in the Sermon on the Mount is the external religious acts, the external righteousness that we do is not as important as the right motives, what's on the inside. You can do the religious thing and it can be absolutely fruitless on the inside. What we're judged by, he says elsewhere, is you will know a tree by its fruit. And several times there are even parables that talk about the importance of fruitfulness. We need to evaluate our own lives, our own Christian walk with God, and make sure that we're not like this fig tree. We look good on the outside, but when you dig a little bit, there's nothing to it. It's all show. We're not like the temple. It looks like a great religious center that had been emptied of its true meaning. We're not like the religious leaders who have the trappings of faith, but when you scratch below the surface, there's really not much there. We should be, to use a phrase that we often use in religious circles, wholeheartedly devoted to Jesus. The whole person, not just the outside, not just going through the motions, not just doing the religious things. Because again, just doing the religious things, going to church, praying, giving, whatever else might be, observing certain holidays, even in this Lenten season, going through the Lenten motions, giving up something for Lent or whatever it is, that isn't the most important. Those things can be valuable, but as they grow out of a heart that is fruitful, that is pointed and worshiping Jesus and lives for him in a way that produces fruit in our life that shows it, not just externals, but internals. That's my encouragement to you. I think it's a great thing to think about and to evaluate ourselves regularly, because it is easy. I will tell you, it is easy, even for preacher types, to get caught up in the everydayness of religion, in the everydayness of church, in the every weakness of church, and miss the true meaning. And there have been times in my life where I've looked and gone, wow, I'm going through the motions and it's not there. And I want to guard against that. And I would encourage you to guard against that too. We don't want to be like this fig tree when Jesus calls us out for our fruitlessness. Well, I guess it's a little bit of you say maybe a harsh thing to look at, but I think it's important. I think it's something that Jesus, in these last days of his life, really focused on and really wanted to make the point to his followers, particularly his disciples who were there and those around them who were seeking the one true God, to know that he represented and what he had was something real and lasting, not just the externals, but uniting the internal with the external to make a difference, to produce fruit of righteousness, of goodness, of faithfulness, of self-control, as Paul writes in Galatians as he talks about that. Okay, well, I really need to finish this cup of coffee. It's been off the heater too long. I might have to go get it warmed up a little bit. I'll let you get back to your day, your Wednesday. Hope you're having a great day. Love, as I always say every week, love to have you join us on Sundays. We're going to be here 9 a.m. for our worship service. If you're in Key Largo, please come on down. We're at mile marker 99. Love to have you join us. We also stream it, but I think there's something special about being in the room, being around other believers as we worship together. If you can, join us. Look forward to seeing you then. If not, well, have a great week, and we'll catch you next time.